Just changing direction here, because to most people listening to the program, I suppose, right now, although not people west of the Great Dividing Range, this tends to be fundamentally meaningless when you talk about wind power. And, of course, all this debate about renewable energy targets, and we know that they're pushing up the price of power, we know that they're driving businesses offshore, we know that you finding and you're writing to me about your electricity bill going through the roof. We're losing our international competitive advantage because we used to have the cheapest energy in the world. Now we've demonised coal-fired power and run like lunatics to embrace wind power and solar power. But of course, if wind power was not injurious to health, why wouldn't we put the turbines where the wind is, in Parramatta Road or Macquarie Street or on Bondi Beach or in Pennsylvania Avenue? We have a Federal Energy Minister, McFarlane, who cares nothing about the issues which derive from wind power. Indeed, he sent a letter to coalition members, senators and staff recently, which said, please find attached and below a standard letter in response to renewable energy target queries. That is the argument that these targets should be abolished. And this is what he's told them. The renewable energy sector should have greater clarity by removing the need for a review of the target every 2 years. This proposal, and he outlined some rubbish, would ensure a doubling of new large-scale and new small-scale renewable energy production under the Renewable Energy Target Scheme between now and 2020. In short, there'll be more new renewable energy installed over the next 6 years of the renewable energy target than has been installed in the first 14 years of the scheme. Well, that'll get him a job when he doesn't stand at the next election with one of these companies on a big salary. But in other words, more wind turbines and your electricity bill goes higher and higher. What about the health consequences? Dr Michael Crawford is the director of the Warborough Foundation. They've been trying to alert government to health risks of wind power. They wrote very recently to Prime Minister Abbott, October 30. Part of the letter says, quote, the Australian government's policies and practices in relation to wind farms are devastating many rural families through prolonged sleep deprivation and other health impacts. The letter says prolonged sleep deprivation is recognised as torture by the United Nations, and thus all Australian public officials are prohibited from causing it by Section 274.2 of the Australian Criminal Code. The Clean Energy Regulator, public officials, may face primary liability under Section 274 of the Criminal Code Act for failing to avert situations which amount to torture by continuing to issue renewable energy certificates for developments where persisting sleep deprivation has been reported. The letter goes on, the UN Committee Against Torture explains why sleep deprivation is torture, and they quote, this letter's gone to the Prime Minister, sleep deprivation can cause impaired memory and cognitive functioning, decreased short-term memory, speech impairment, hallucinations, psychosis, lowered immunity, headaches, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, stress, anxiety and depression. This is the UN Committee. The letter to the Prime Minister said of October 30 this year, the harm is being done to Australians with the complicity of the Australian government agencies and apparently with the knowledge and acquiescence of ministers in your government. The problem is not a matter of wind farms per se, it's a matter of where they're built in relation to people and how they're operated with respect to harmful noise generation. Current siting and operational decisions are based on maximising revenue for developers, foreign developers I might add, while ignoring and denying or downplaying the harm to people. In other words, torture is being done for profit. I would have thought that's a pretty serious letter. Serious allegations. What does our AMA say, Australian Medical Association? Quote, the available Australian and international evidence does not support the view that it's run by a left-winger, by the way, the AMA now, constantly criticising the Abbott government, but it says the available Australian and international evidence does not support the view that the infrasound or low-frequency sound generated by wind farms, as they're currently regulated in Australia, causes adverse health effects on populations residing in their vicinity. And it goes on, the AMA. I have a file here which you couldn't jump over of dreadful, dreadful letters from you people listening. I'll just give you one. This is a woman who wrote to me. She's right next to a wind farm. Early this morning at 12, this is awful, 12:30 a.m, I woke suddenly to an excruciating pain in the muscle above my elbow on my left arm. I was lying on my right side. I hadn't slept. The pain was enormous. I got out of bed. I went back to bed and the left arm pulsating with pain. At 5:45 a.m. I woke again. The sound of an intermittent ring, like a distant bell, and my body felt sore. When I got out of bed, my body was stiff and sore, aching around my kidneys and hips and my back. The last episode has reduced me to tears, and today I've just had enough. I don't want to have to leave my beautiful farm in a pine box. This is my home. This is my life. I'm so frightened about what's happening to me, as in long-term damage to my health. Now, I have letters like these a mile long. I wonder, one woman wrote to a newspaper down in Victoria, dismissing the concerns about wind energy and health, and a woman wrote, a mother. I wonder if Jo Smith, that's the woman who wrote the letter, would be quite so cocky if she'd spent the last few nights sleeping to the east of the MacArthur wind farm. If she came and talked to us, she'd hear of our sleep-disrupted nights, because the noise is incessant and debilitating. When you try to block it out, it comes through the pillow. She'd learn that there are nights when the noise is heard above the television. She might feel sympathy for those who suffer headaches and nausea, which began after the turbines started turning. There are people at least 5 kilometres away who are feeling the effects and suffering sleep deprivation. Not every night is as bad, but this week's been awful. This morning we drove our son to Tullamarine. We were all wide awake about 2:30. We couldn't go back to sleep. I had a fitful 2 hours sleep prior to that. In total I had about 2 hours sound sleep. How safe are we driving on the roads if we're sleep deprived? The letters go on. There's a mile of them. I arrived home this afternoon from a couple of days' respite from MacArthur Wind Factory to see all the turbines off at 4:30 p.m. I thought, great, no infrasound. When I walked into my home, it felt quiet and peaceful. The air was clear. At 6:15, I was at my computer, and I thought a large truck was coming down my driveway. I had to stop what I was doing and listen for a moment to work out what was going on. The noise was horrendous. The rumbling and rattling and thumping and banging. For a moment, I wasn't sure what it was. I drove down to the corner and saw the turbines turning. That was what the ruckus was about. They were all being turned on again. Since then and now, at 8:55 p.m, I felt as though I could jump out of my skin or go around with a punching bag. My muscles are tight and electric. I feel as though I want to release this enormous energy. The air in the house is electric. My body is vibrating. My voice is even vibrating when I speak. Now I know how the prisoners felt in the war when Germany used infrasound to torture them. This is what it must have been like, to send them mad, to scramble their brains, to render them helpless. This is infrasound. You know it, I know it, and my independent acoustician knows it. Turn the turbines off at night so we can get a good night's sleep. Do the decent thing if that's possible. Letters everywhere. Letters everywhere. Well, Dr Jay Tibbetts is a practising physician, a member of the Brown County Board of Health, a medical advisor to the Brown County Health Department in Wisconsin, America. He has been alerted to the position of the Australian Medical Association and has called them misguided. He's indicated that over the past few years his board, the Brown County Board of Health, has studied the deleterious effects of wind turbines on human health and has found that they constitute quite a human health hazard, quote, for residents, workers, visitors and passers-by. In other words, this is coal seam gas all over again. Shove them up and don't worry about them. Dr Tibbetts has written to the AMA about its stance. Not only does Dr Tibbetts have the US study to fall back on, he's well informed in terms of the Australian perspective. And basically, Brown County Board members in the state of Wisconsin in America have declared wind turbines a public health risk. Dr Jay Tibbetts is on the line from Wisconsin. Dr Tibbetts, thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you, Alan, and good morning, Australia and Sydney.
What do you make of all of this? It's astonishing, isn't it, that political leaders can ignore that kind of on-the-ground, at-the-coalface evidence?
Well, that is a problem, and as you said, it's political, or at least a lot of it is, and it has to do with jobs and things that we don't have a lot of control over at this time.
I mean, you have this Shirley wind farm near the town of Glenmore, Duke Energy Renewables. 3 families have had to move out of their homes rather than endure physical illness, and your health department is the statutory authority for licensing, for inspection, and for enforcement. What does that mean for wind farms where you are?
Well, this is a whole new territory. As you said, we have authority over facilities, specifically food establishments and so on, but the utility is a different thing. However, we have a situation where we are really we have no option but to declare this a human health hazard under Section 38 of the Public Health Nuisance Ordinance of Brown County. And I want to just read the section that we used. It's Section B under 3801. A human health hazard means a substance, activity, or condition that's known to have the potential to cause acute or chronic illness or death if exposure to the substance, activity, or condition is not abated. Now, there's no question in my mind, nor is there any question in the Brown County Board of Health's mind, that this fits the description of a human health hazard.
Yes, I mean, you've got on the ground evidence. I mean, I read about a fellow called Darryl Ashley, who lives within a mile of turbines there. He said his wife moved out of the house for several months until her symptoms disappeared. She's since moved back and the symptoms have returned. He said, I'm getting worse and I can't afford to move out. I'm just getting weaker. My legs, my back, my feet, my concentration's gone, head pressure, earaches, headaches, it just goes on and on. How can government ignore this?
Well, that's the big question. And again, it's a political issue, and until we get to the authorities that we need to, and there's enough of a cage rattled, things are not going to get done. I think right now we kind of poked a hole in a hornet's nest, and we're going to hopefully make some progress here.
I mean, the UN Committee Against Torture says, we're talking about sleep deprivation here. I've got a file that you couldn't jump over about these desperate people writing to me saying you're the only person we can talk to who's prepared to listen. The UN Committee Against Torture says sleep deprivation can cause impaired memory and cognitive functioning, decreased short-term memory, speech impairment, hallucinations, psychosis, lowered immunity, headaches, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, stress, anxiety, and depression. I mean, all these things are related to me by people who write to me living within the vicinity of wind turbines.
Well, that's very true, and yet we have in our community, we distributed an informational letter to all the physicians in our community in the county of Brown, and amazingly, one large clinic refused to share the information with its providers because they have questions about whether any of these issues are really true.
Well, that's right. I mean, the letter that was written here to the Prime Minister was referred to the Minister for Industry and Energy rather than the Minister for Health.
Yeah.
What?
Well, what does that tell you?
What does it tell you? I mean, our coalition here, the Abbott coalition, made an election promise before the election last year to ensure that research, recommended, quote, as a priority, multidisciplinary research, would be conducted into this issue. But, of course, the wind power industry have lobbied the government. Nothing has happened. And these people write and complain. Where on earth do we go to get health justice for these people?
Well, I want to correct one thing. We declared it a human health hazard.
Right.
I interpret a risk being something you could take and not take. Right. These people have no option. They live in an area that is a human health hazard.
Good on you.
So they don't have any option. You asked where we go from here. I think the best thing is right now to use some of the information that Rick James has given us. He states that wind turbines produce an infrasound at significant levels where an indicator is a human health response. His conclusion is, based on the above, it's reasonable to conclude that the adverse health effects reported by members of the Shirley community are linked to the operation of the Shirley Wind Project turbines. While there may be a debate about the precise mechanism that causes these sounds to induce the symptoms, it is clear from this study and others conducted in different parts of the world by other acousticians that acoustic energy emitted by the operation of modern utility-scale wind turbines is at the root of adverse health effects. Now, his solution, if you will, following the precautionary principle, it is concluded that the operation of Shirley Wind Project is exposing the community members to acoustic energy that can be linked to the reported adverse health effects is similar to other historical problems and other infrasound sources. And the only method available to protect the community's health is not to operate the wind turbines close to home.
That's it.
For that to occur, either the utility must terminate operations or it should operate a buffer zone, which you and I and everybody else knows does not exist at this point in time.
That's it.
Between the wind turbines and the closest residential properties.
So just remember, earlier this year, so you're talking about that survey, earlier this year, the Irish Department of Health, the chief medical officer warned in Ireland that people who live near wind turbines risk having their health and psychological well-being compromised. And the Irish Examiner newspaper reported that following a review of research on the effects of wind turbine noise on human health, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer said, quote, there is a consistent cluster of symptoms related to wind turbine syndrome which occurs in a number of people in the vicinity of industrial wind turbines. And they called the wind turbine syndrome a condition suffered by people living within earshot of the noise made by wind turbine blades as they spin around. Now, if it weren't a risk, why not put them in Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington?
Well, of course. Then you have the option of avoiding them.
Yeah. Just
but
amazing.
These people don't have that option.
No option at all.
They're living in this stew, if you will.
Yeah, human health hazard. A stew.
Yes.
A stew.
Yes. That's exactly what the motion was, a human health hazard. Yeah.
Good on you. Good to talk to you, and thank you for your time. We may need to talk again.
Very well. We certainly will be available to do it any time.
There he is, Dr. Jay Tibbetts, the Vice President of the Brown County Health Board in Wisconsin. They've declared wind turbines a human health hazard. We're asking poor Australians, defenceless Australians, to just cop it. And in Canberra, McFarlane and co., they write to the Prime Minister, and the letter gets sent to the Department of Energy, the Minister for Energy, not the Minister for Health.